The human brain is an amazing organ. Though it only accounts for 2% of the weight of an adult human, it uses around 20% of the energy our bodies produce. Many of the tasks our brains complete happen without our conscious awareness. When we're asleep, for instance, our brains remain very active, regulating the bodily processes that keep us alive. But what's really cool and unique about the human brain, compared to the brains of other organisms, is the advanced cognitive capacities that give us the power of self-reflection, self-regulation, and ultimately self-determination. We can think deeply about what we want to do with our lives, and then we can turn those thoughts into actions. We have incredible imaginations that allow us not just to dream, but to experiment, create, build, and innovate. We're certainly not the only social organism, but we are unique in our ability to generate, test, and share ideas that advance our understanding of the world and help us take on the type of collaborative projects that improve the world. Ultimately, our advanced cognitive capacities make us an existential species. We don't just strive for survival, we strive for significance. We want our lives to be meaningful. Interestingly, in our discussions of freedom, we talk about the legal, economic, political, philosophical structures that support freedom, but we rarely talk about the underlying psychology that makes these broader structures possible and sustainable. For example, now there's some debate about whether or not certain mental illnesses are truly becoming more common. But there is good evidence that at a minimum, Americans, and especially American teens and young adults, are becoming more anxious. Now, we tend to think of anxiety as a mental health problem, and rightly so, but it's much more than that. When people are anxious or afraid, they become more dogmatic and defensive. They become less creative and entrepreneurial. They become less inspired and agentic. The rising anxiety might help explain why Americans, and especially young American adults, are becoming more mentally and physically passive, distrustful of their fellow citizens, skeptical of individual liberty, and pessimistic about the future. For a free society to flourish, it needs to be populated with mentally healthy individuals who are able and willing to take responsibility for their lives. It needs to be populated with people who believe in themselves, their fellow citizens, and the broader institutions that support freedom and opportunity. It needs to be populated with action-oriented individuals who are motivated to roll up their sleeves and to work hard to improve their own lives and to make positive contributions to their families and communities and broader society. It needs to be populated with people with an optimistic outlook, because optimism drives the type of creative, innovative, and aspirational projects that advance civilizational progress. Critically, it needs to be populated with people who believe in their ability to live meaningful lives. Now, I think meaning is at the core of psychological freedom because it is such a powerful self-regulatory and motivational resource. In other words, meaning's more than a feeling. It has an agentic nature, what I refer to as existential agency or the meaning mindset. When people fully embrace their ability to make meaningful contributions to the world, they take ownership of their life journey. They recognize that even though there are things in life that are outside of our control, we can control how we live. Viktor Frankl powerfully illustrated this point in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, which, if you haven't read, I highly recommend. He wrote, "We who lived in the concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts, comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's own attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." A meaning mindset helps people confront their fears and boldly go out in the world to pursue their own goals and to serve others. A meaning mindset makes people hopeful and resilient. It encourages us to build on our strengths, but also to work on our weaknesses. In short, when people fully understand and act on their ability to live meaningful lives, they are well positioned to actualize their psychological freedom. And that psychological freedom paves the way for broader social and economic freedom. At the Archbridge Institute, we're dedicated to promoting economic freedom and to removing barriers to social mobility. We think these are critical components of human flourishing. But we also think a focus on economics and material well-being offers an insufficient framework for understanding and addressing the biggest challenges of our time. We need a more holistic approach that recognizes the psychological and related social needs and dispositions that drive a considerable amount of human activity. This is why we recently launched the Human Flourishing Lab. Our approach to human flourishing is based on a fundamental belief in human potential and agency. It recognizes that at our best, we are not just able to serve ourselves, but to make positive contributions to the world. I believe this more holistic approach to human flourishing will help us better study, test, and ultimately promote the psychological ingredients of freedom. And I think it will also help us re-energize a culture of liberty. Thank you for your time.